Hello, everybody, and welcome to another great episode of My EdTech Life. Thank you so much for joining us on this wonderful day, and wherever it is that you're joining us from around the world. As always, we appreciate all the likes, the shares, the follows. Thank you so much for engaging with our content, and all of this would not be possible if it wasn't for our amazing sponsors. Thank you so much, Book Creator, Eduade, Yellow Dig, and Peelback Education for believing in our mission to bring these amazing conversations to continue to help our educators continue to grow professionally and personally as well. So thank you so much. And if you're interested on becoming a sponsor for this coming new year, please shoot me a message at myedtech.live/contacts. And we can definitely talk about that as the new year is filling up. But I am excited about today's conversation. I have been following our guests for a while now and going back and forth on LinkedIn. And it's just been a pleasure to see his progress, his growth, working from companies, and now a freshly minted doctor. And I am excited to welcome to the show Dr. Mendoza, and that's Dr. Joey Mendoza. So, how are you today, Joey?
Good morning, Doc. Thank you for having me, Dr. Mendoza. I'm doing well here in Corpus Christi, Texas, so not too far from where you're at. But yeah, thanks for having me on the show. Like you, been following you on LinkedIn, some of the episodes, and I was like, you know what? I like the topics. If they're relevant, you do the English and the Spanish, and I'm like, yeah, let's do it. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, excited to have you here. And also, it was a pleasure to have met you in person at ISTE this past year. I'm just walking by there, the booths, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, it's Joey. And it's
Yeah,
fantastic,
yeah.
getting to meet in real life and making that connection. And like you said, just the proximity to one another and just, knowing this region very well. And it's always great to highlight educators here from our Valley region, Rio Grande Valley, this area, South Texas, and everything. And that's just fantastic. So thank you for being on the show today. So I'm really excited about today, Joey, because again, like I mentioned, freshly minted doctor. So I'm really excited to learn and having our guests learn a little bit more about your dissertation topic because I found it very interesting. We'll talk about that. And of course, we'll talk about a little bit about your education background and the work that you're doing now with this great company. And we'll get into that in just a second. But before we dive in, just so our audience members know you a little bit more, can you give us a little brief introduction and what your context is within the education space?
Sure. Yeah, I'm currently working for a company called YaizY in the ed tech sector, CTE, STEM space, right? And prior to that, I was with another company. Prior to that, I worked for an education regional center here in Corpus. And then prior to that, I was an administrator, teacher, coach, substitute, all that good stuff, right? So I've been through the K through 12 system on the ed tech side now. And so having a blend of both worlds. I think it's unique, and we can dive into that. You're in the same right kind of row where you have a foot in both, right? And so it definitely shaped my thinking, my experiences, and then definitely shaped my doctoral program or my dissertation um, that's going to get published here soon. So yeah.
Excellent. Well, I'm excited about that. So let's talk first about just your experience. Because, well, before we dive into the dissertation, I know that I knew you from a previous company, and let's talk a little bit about that STEM world too, as well. So that's something that has always been of interest to me, and so I wanted to ask you about yourself and your experience in the STEM field and STEM related. Companies that you worked for and that you
Sure.
did, what drove that passion into the STEM field and to dive in and kind of, get yourself started in that before, going into your dissertation?
I fell into it accidentally, and I say that with like excitement, right? Because I look back at when I was teaching and my mindset that I had as an administrator, it was very STEM focused. I just didn't know it at the time. And so I taught social studies in inner city here, Corpus, for about 7 years. And the way I approached it was a little untraditional, right? I always tied it into careers, and that's very difficult to do from a social studies, government, history side of things. And so I've always had that lens. And then when getting into the administration, I was exposed to more CTE side. right? And so I dove into there, and then I went to the service center, and then I got to work on a tremendous project called high impact tutoring, right? That's what my dissertation basically on. And so I was exposed to these ed tech companies that were delivering online instruction in 2020, right? And so their programs, they were kind of self-paced, but they would remediate in real time, and they would accelerate the learning in real time as students would go through it. And those terms I never heard of at the time. That's interesting. Like, how does that happen? Because coming from the non-techie world at the time, I was like, what do you mean? Like they're just gathering data points on students and then like telling them to go back on a problem or forward on a problem? Okay. Right. And it started getting into automation and things like that. And so I worked on that project, and that exposed me to STEM and ed tech companies. It's like, I can do something like that. And so 2021, the high impact tutoring grant that I was on was grant funded. And so it was coming to an end. And so I had to find another job. Right. And so I wasn't ready to go back into the school districts, and started looking into these ed tech companies, and found the STEM one that you're referring to. Pittsco Education, of mine, saying that doing great work in the STEM field. Um, and so found them, landed there, and worked with them for 3 years across the state of Texas, hosting STEM events, CTE events, competitions, you name it, they probably do it. Very hands-on hardware. And so that was my introduction to the STEM space. But again, looking back on it, I was always doing STEM. We just didn't call it that for whatever reason.
Yeah. No, you know what? It's so interesting, Joey, because though I'm hearing you and listening to your path and your trajectory in this area, in this first part of our conversation today and talking about STEM related fields, but it's a very similar start to the way that I did. Now, number one, like you said, you fell into it, on accident, but gratefully you did, because you've been doing some great things and you continue to do some great things. Also, like myself, I tell, and many people have heard this on the show, like, I fell into teaching, but then I absolutely fell in love with it. And then when I moved to elementary, like you said, I had no idea I was doing STEM. I just went to, TCEA one year in 2000, I believe it was like 2016, 17, one year. And then I came back and I was like, all right, everybody, we're going to start using this. And I
Yep.
started doing
Yep.
donors choose grants, and I was like, all right, we're going to do robots, we're going to do this.
Yep.
And but really integrating it into the current curriculum and finding creative, innovative ways to make those ties with the standards and still be able to cover our standards, but make the learning, like you said, very like hands-on, very engaging. Students are the ones that are in control, they're the ones that are
Yep.
creating the learning, and so on. And then so that led to just starting a little robotics club in my on my campus, and saying, okay, we're going to do a little robotics club. And then that turned into like a summer STEM camp for like the district for 3 years, continuously, and helping the robotics programs and the young ladies also to learn how to do the coding, get into robotics, and so on. But then, of course, COVID hit, and then, of course, things changed. But it was just something that is fantastic, just being in there and being hands on with the robots and working with students in a very hands-on manner. And a lot of those students have gone on to, graduate and follow pursuing, computer science or engineering. And it's just been fantastic to hear the work that they're doing now when we first started many years ago. So it's amazing. And I love the way that that kind of transitions into the following conversation, which is really the world of CTE, which now you're finding yourself immersed in. So tell us a little bit about that, I guess, new leap into this world with this edtech company, and with CTE and pathways too as well.
Sure. So YaizY is a K through 12 CTE company that wants to get students into digital skills, right? And so when we think about digital skills, we're thinking about digital marketing, right? Digital media, arts, visuals, computer science, as you mentioned, cybersecurity. Um, I mentioned computer science, Python, Scratch code, all that good stuff. Uh, and the way I see it, right? So we have a standard curriculum that we created, and We have our own LMS that students kind of go through the courses there, but the meat and potatoes of it, as you know, is the teacher, right? And so we can either put a teacher fully in place to teach those CTE courses because those industry folks are hard to find, especially in some rural spaces in Texas. But also, we can zoom in a CTE instructor to kind of take students through those pathways in order to get certifications to get into those higher paying wage jobs, right? That everybody's talking about. But the missing piece that I don't think it's talked enough about with YaizY's, we're creating kind of these digital nomads, right? Where you're creating these digital skills, but for students or right now they're going to be adults going into the workforce where those young adults can work from anywhere in the world. Right? Not that everybody wants to do that, but as a South Texas kid, I was like, I want to see everything. I want to get out there. How can I craft my profession to be able to do that, right? And so that was a leap into the tech sector because right, I work remotely here in Corpus. I get to travel a little bit. I get my wife in her job, she gets to travel, and so I get to go with her sometimes, and vice versa, and that works for us, right? But that's a part of YaizY that it's we're creating these digital nomads where that work is already here and it's just going to get bigger and bigger, right? Where people can work from anywhere in the world with internet access and things like that. So yeah, we're big in the CTE space about all about credentials, but going back to the most important piece, as you know, is the instructor, right? We have a great way of vetting our teachers, of getting our teachers certified through our own proprietary system, and making sure that's aligned with the district's goals and the campus goals that they're looking for. So whether in person or online, you can have the best curriculum or the best LMS in the world, but you need to have somebody to deliver that and get students to buy into you and the content.
Yeah. And I think, you mentioned a couple of things that I do want to unpack that really got me excited. And like you said, number one, also with CTE, like you mentioned, digital nomads, the ability for our students to now be able to be equipped with the knowledge of just computer literacy altogether. Now, of course, right now, artificial intelligence, generative AI is huge. And, talking about AI literacy and all of that. But just being able to use hardware, software to be able to, learn a little bit of coding and all of
Sure.
those things. But not only that, Joey, I think like you mentioned too a little bit about those certifications. One of the things that I have seen oftentimes is that there is a list, for example, here in Texas. We know that in Texas, there is a list for CTE certifications, and many times a lot of districts may not be able to cover a lot of those certifications based on obviously the programming that we have within our campuses and so on. So I think having a platform that might be able to offer something like you mentioned, being able to get a student on a pathway, and like you mentioned, this is K-12, correct? Or is it
K, I would say fourth grade and up.
okay, 4th grade and up,
Yeah,
perfect. I mean, and that's a great age, 4th grade and up, to be able to kinda put them on this path, and then they start kinda discovering, like, "Hey, what are some of my interests? What are the things that I really enjoy doing?" And then that way, from such a young age, the young child can kinda start having an idea and start, getting equipped with those tools to be able to continue to move forward into what it is that they desire, and I think that that's something that is huge that oftentimes, kind of like with CTE, like I mentioned, sometimes I feel like those conversations might fall a little bit on the wayside and are not upfront and, in front of all our stakeholders to have them see the potential that is there for our learners and for them to come out equipped with an industry certification that they might be already be able to obtain a job as soon as they graduate, and maybe during that time be able to hop into a university program or something, but at least they are already working and maybe they don't have to get into some major debt, as we know with college
Yeah.
education being so high. So I think that that is something that is fantastic to be able to start at such an early age. So now getting back a little bit to the CTE conversation, now with your experience and what are some things that are maybe some persistent myths or misunderstandings that educators or even parents might have about CTE that you can think of? Because for me, I'll tell you, for me, it's just really like, well, CTE is just going to be like cosmetology, ag, and welding, and that's it. Like those three programs,
Yeah.
and maybe like EMS. And so that's the misconception that I see, that I'm like, well, it's only three programs, like, what else can we do? What has been your experience, or maybe some of the misunderstandings that you see are still out there, or maybe that you yourself had prior?
Behind every classroom door, there's a story of patience, creativity, and the quiet power of shaping the next generation. Peel Back Education shines a light on these lived experiences, the real voices of educators on the front lines. Don't just subscribe to Real Voices, discover them, connect with them, and maybe even share your own too. Visit peelbackeducation.com to discover the stories shaping education and the people just like you living them every day.
I think some of the misunderstandings is that folks, the parents, even educators think that it's designed, CTE is designed for a subset of students, right? Like, hey, if you want to go this pathway, you have to go, you're a CTE students, right? They define them and they put them in a box. And parents do too, right? They say, oh, well, we're a blue collar family. We do XYZ. You're going to go down this way. But if you're not, then you're going to go to college or whatnot. But there's this other path, right? When we talk about digital skills, that it's exposure. To be frank with my answer, I think it's a little misconception on what is CTE and what all it can provide. Now the shift's coming, whether parents or educators are ready for it. That CTE is the future, or right? These certifications are going to become a premium if they're not already. And I say that because there's universities that are offering these certification. Google data analytics certification, Google cybersecurity certifications. If you come to their university, you can take these for free, right? And so they're stacking them on a college degree. And so what does that tell you, right? That they're that important in the workforce. And so I say that because when I make a move into the CTE world heavily, that was part of it. I'm seeing the shift kind of move towards that way. You're starting to see people talk about more CTE, right? And open discussions like this, and that is needed. But yeah, it's just parents don't know what they don't know about CTE. I tie it back to the tutoring, right, about my dissertation, because tutoring has this kind of negative connotation to it when it says, hey, if you're going to tutoring, then it's bad. No, not necessarily. Tutoring is to catch up, it's to get ahead, it's to stay on path, right? And CTE is kind of the same way. Oh, if you're a CTE student, then you must be going into the trades. Not necessarily. I can go into the digital skills part of it, learn how to code, right? Learn how to digital marketing, learn entrepreneurship, business and marketing, all those good things. So I think it's us that are in the CTE field can do a better job of just having that microphone and speaking to a broad audience and say, hey, if you haven't thought about CTE, check this out. And here's why, right? And sharing a little data and research to back it up, right? Instead of just standing on your podium and saying, here's why you should do it, but bringing the data and saying, hey, here's what the jobs are saying that are needed in the next 10 years.
Yeah. And one thing that I do like about that you did mention is, the certification talk. I think we're missing out. And I don't know if it's just me, but I'm pretty sure, like, I mean, at least hearing you talking about that certification aspect, I think that we may be missing out on some great opportunities for our students. And like you said, it's all about parents not knowing what they don't know yet, and like being able to offer student or parents that information of the advantages of being able to obtain a certification while you're in high school to again be able to readily jump into a job, or maybe that employer might say, you know what, with this certification you are already showing that you can handle this task and this task and this task, and you know what, because you're already working for me and the work that you're doing, I can pay for maybe your next level certification or the following certification, where now I to me that in the long run, I'm seeing things in the long run as far as expenses. You're minimizing expenses for number one, parents. You know, I know that we talk about, yes, 4 year university, but I think in the last for me, at least in the last 4 years, I've seen a lot more talk about, you know, the trades, being able to get those certifications, hearing and seeing how young men and women are obtaining these certifications at an early age and not going into debt, but they are already, you know, making profit and not having to worry about paying back loads and loads of debt, excuse me, after
Yeah.
yeah, loads and
Yeah.
loads of debt
Yeah.
after a 4 year, you know, university
Yeah.
certificate or diploma. And I'm not saying that going to university, you don't go to university. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that there are different career paths. And I think oftentimes what has happened is there's just been this kind of negative connotation. I was like, oh, you're CTE, you're going into trades. Like you're seeing that in kind of like, oh, you know, what is that? But now I think that this is coming around where it's like, you know what, man, if I would have known, and I've had this
Yes.
conversation with many professionals such as yourself and many others thinking, man, you know what, if I would have known this, I would have just gone into these trades or would have gone
Yes.
into this and spent, you know, lead and things might have been different, but you know, this is the path that we chose. Now, the other thing is too that I like that you said is for example, in my master's program, they stacked, you know, certifications on there. So
Hmm.
not only did you get your master's in educational technology, but while doing those courses, you also got a certification in technology leadership and, you know, all these other things, which is kind of great and see, and it's a value add, you know, but it is that value add to that, you know, first 4 years. Now it's another 18 months into a master's program to get those additional certifications, where maybe something like that now, you know, through a program like YaizY, like, you know, being able to come out, imagine coming out of high school already with 2 or 3 certifications because you've tested and you were successful with those tests. And now you're immediately workforce ready because you're honing in on those skills that you need for that specific job. But I think that even then you are already picking up other skills, you know, going
Yes.
through a platform. So I want to talk to you a little bit about that. Can you tell me a little bit about how YaizY works? So let's say I'm a fourth grader and you know, it's my first day. This is my first year with YaizY, and if I continue that trajectory, what might I see, and what would the end result be for that student?
Yeah, so let's go with the fourth grade example. We'd probably put them in the STEM pathway, maybe computer science. So they'll get introduced to coding at a very foundational level, right? Maybe some block coding. And then as they transition into middle school, those would be self paced courses at the elementary level, right? Or a hybrid approach, however the school district wants to approach that. But and then as they get into middle school, then we would like to have our CTE instructor either zoom in with that student or students, group of students, for 6 weeks, 9 week course, semester course. They go through the platform, very project based learning platform. They spend about 60% of their time just building, right? When for this specific example, they're building something with computer science, right? And so they would spend 60% of that, and then they'll have about 10% of peer to peer kind of feedback on their project, right? And then they would go through that progression. Um, and then once they get into high school, they have an idea, okay, under the computer science, what am I most attracted to? Where do I see myself getting a career into? Is that software development? Is it cybersecurity? And so we would put them on that trajectory in high school to prepare them to take the test junior, senior year.
That is great. And that's something that is wonderful, that you already have something that is already aligned for those students and as they go through. And I think oftentimes, as in my experience, I've heard of other programs, or maybe they're programs that are just really siloed and saying, well, this is just for computer science. So let me show you what computer science can do, or let me show you what this can do. But also having a program that can offer, variety, I think is something that would be very beneficial. But I want to ask you, Joe, and these might be some of those tough questions that maybe in your experience, I know I've seen in my experience what might occur, but in your experience and just overall, what might be some of the barriers that school districts may have with implementing not just a program like YaizY, but just implementing CTE programs? Because I have seen from other districts and other colleagues of mine that are working in other districts where, sometimes things don't come through the way that we think they would, and their programs kind of just start kind of fizzling out. What do you think some of the barriers would be?
I think it takes a CTE driven leader, right? Whether that's a superintendent, whether that's a campus principal, to really build the culture around CTE. Right now that your campus has to neglect STAR, math, and reading, that's never going to go away. But somebody who has an idea, and that's what I'm finding when I'm having conversations with directors, superintendents, CTE director, campus principals, is that their CTE is their own little world, right? Like, hey, their CTE director handles all of that. And so I think that's one of the barriers is not having that synergy as a campus to say, hey, CTE is all of us, right? And we all have a hand on how these programs move forward. One, because we need to know where the funding is coming from, right? We need to vet some of these programs to say, okay, which one's the best fit for your campus, your district. And then once you decide on that, how do you measure academic return on investment from that program, right? And so you're in the data world now, and so I'm sure you're tasked with doing that. But though those three that I just mentioned, right, having a CT-minded driven leader, obviously finding the funding and having that synergy between departments, and then vetting and finding if the program is bringing that academic return, are all three things that are hard to do at scale. And so that's why, to answer your question, I think that there's some barriers there to establishing a well-oiled CTE program. And the ones that are doing well are the traditional ones that we had in the 80s, right? That are just kind of embedded in the culture of the school, and we're known for having a nice welding program and a good welding program. And so we're going to continue doing that, and we're a welding school. Well, you have other students that are saying otherwise, according to the surveys the last 5 years, right? According to the data. And so shifting to that, it takes a lot of upfront work to vet some of these programs that can assist with CTE programs, but and then measuring the academic return on investment also to say, okay, our welding program's working great. Is our computer science program working great? Is our drone program working great? Or whatever pathway you decide on, is measuring that and coming back to the conversation and saying, okay, we need to add more of this, or we need to eliminate this. And those are hard conversations to have that some folks don't want to have, right? Because either they're a B-rated school, they're an A-rated school, and things are going great. So why disrupt what is going good?
Yeah.
Howdy, y'all. It's Farmer Fops from Book Creator. Now listen up, partner. If you're wrangling lesson plans and trying to keep your students engaged, I got just the tool for you. Now remember, every student and teacher deserves a yeehaw moment, and Book Creator can give you just that. Book Creator makes it easy to get your students creating, collaborating, and sharing their ideas all in one place. Book Creator turns any classroom into a digital frontier, whether it's interactive notebooks, portfolios, or good old storytelling. Now, did I tell you it plays nice with all the other favorite apps? Egg smash it. I mean app smash it with Adobe, Google, and much more to take creativity to greener pastures. So saddle up and give it a try. Use promo code MyEdTechLife for a 3-month special treat.
Yeah, I think that's one of the answers that you get. Well, all three I do agree with, but one of the ones that you mentioned is like this is the way we've always done it, and that's it. Like these are our programs, and this is what we're going to stick to, and so on. But then I feel that in not growing or expanding or trying, or at least being able to speak to your students, maybe having a student advisory board or something,
Yes.
just being able to hear their voices. It's like, hey, what other programs might you be interested in, and seeing if those programs are feasible? Because oftentimes, like I mentioned, you'll see cosmetology, you'll see welding, you'll see ag, as more prominent. And then sometimes I'll hear, other districts they'll have, like media, but those aren't too packed, or maybe even just some of the business information or business courses that they have, also as well, and are very low numbers. But one of the things that you hit on too was the importance of being able to not silo that program, because I love what you said. It's like, hey, these are all our students, not just say, oh, those are CTE students. Like, don't, it's okay. They're CTE. That's fine. Like, let's worry about this. No, I mean, they are all our students. And I think sometimes having that mentality, it really does hurt those programs, because obviously we need to focus here in Texas. It's always all about star. We want to worry
Yeah.
about our ratings. We want to worry about
Yeah.
our distinctions. We want to worry about what is important to the school as far as the school looking great. And yes, of course, our students are doing phenomenal, but being able to not only be an A-rated school, but to also imagine having like this wonderful, robotics or coding program, or computer science program or engineering program, things of that sort of preparing the students for the skills that they need for making that jump, whether it might be a 2-year degree, an associate's degree, it may be a 4-year plan that can later on move on to something else, or just that immediacy of, hey, I just graduated at 18, and guess what? I already have a job. And it's like, wow, that's amazing. But that,
A nice page out too.
yeah,
And I would add, Doc, that right, we're saying, hey, what can the districts do to kind of bridge the gap to improve the CTE program? And I won't put it all on the school districts, right? Like the business partners and the industry partners have a say in that too, right? Because they're the ones that are going to need the workforce, whether it's locally, regionally, or statewide. But the district has to go first, and they have to reach out and say, hey, we're looking to build XYZ program. And I know you're an engineering firm that is here locally. What kind of engineers do you need? And how can we support that? And can we work together to build a program that we get them the certifications, and then we create that little pipeline, whether it's a local engineering firm. I just use that as an example, but the district has to go first. It can't rely on industry coming to us and saying, hey, we have X amount of money. Can you build a program? We got to take that first step.
I love it. I love it, Joey. That's fantastic. Well, I want to kind of change now a little bit, because I think this is a great conversation on CTE and what YaizY has to offer. But I want to talk a little bit more about your dissertation. I mean, this is one of the reasons too that I definitely wanted to talk to you or bring you on the show too, because I think that this is fantastic. And again, getting to know you, through LinkedIn, and then getting to meet you in person, and then obviously myself too, just in July, defended my dissertation, and then you just also recently, defended your dissertation. But just to, hear about that. And so tell me a little bit about, your dissertation. Where did that, I know you kind of mentioned it briefly, but again, where did that research stem from? And tell me a little bit, or tell us a little bit more about your findings through that research.
Yeah. And so the title of my dissertation is does after school program influence star math performance? Right. So it's something I wanted it to be relevant. I wanted it to be relevant to the work that I'm currently doing. Right. And the companies that I've worked for over the last 3.5 years have all been in the after school space. And so when I started my doctoral program, I was working at the service center. I was a high impact tutoring manager. And so I would go into school districts and help them or support them in accelerated learning, right? In reading and math, right? COVID had just, we're coming out of COVID. So star scores weren't great. And so how can we improve that? Well, one of the silver bullets at the time was high impact tutoring, right? And so there was a breadth of research that was coming down from a lot smarter people than me that were saying, hey, here's the direction that we have to go in order to improve math and science score. And so I went down a rabbit hole and was like, tutoring is the way, right? You have that thought when you don't really know how to put your thoughts together and research and use data to kind of predict some stuff. And so that nugget kind of stuck in my head when I started my doctoral program. And so I spent a year at the service center doing that work. And I was like, man, it's research based. It's good. Not a lot of people know about it. I'm going to do some more research in my doctoral program. And so started my doctoral program, and we couldn't get tutoring out of my head. Like, right, it's the extra hours outside of school. It's more flexible. Like, you can be creative with groups and programs, and we need to train the staff a certain way and 3 times a week and 30 minutes and focus, intentional. And so I was sold on tutoring. And so I spoke to my chair, and he's like, look, you're gung-ho at tutoring. We'll do that, but we have to make it relevant to either South Texas or Texas statewide. I said, okay, well, let's connect it to STAR math scores, because we can see that the math scores haven't improved, right, over the last 5 years or whatever, since COVID. And so went down that rabbit hole, and what we found was that, yes, after school tutoring programs influence STAR math performance, but not as much as attendance rate during the school day affects STAR math results. And so that was interesting for a couple of reasons. One, it shot down my theory of like, hey, tutoring is a silver bullet. And we didn't get into program implementation and program fidelity. We didn't get that much into it. What we just looked at was like, hey, these elementary students or these elementary campuses have an after school program. These middle school programs have an after school program. Let's look at their star scores, right? And kind of made that connection there. And there was some connection. But yeah, the biggest variable was, and we took other variables into consideration. We looked at whether those campuses were a Title I school, the teacher to student ratio. We looked at attendance rates. We looked at funding. And the one that stuck out of all those was attendance rate. If there was a higher attendance rate in those campuses, they had a higher star score at the end of it.
Man, that is interesting, because that is what we often hear is you've got HB 1416. It's like, let's get all the kids into tutoring. Let's make sure that they're doing their 30 minutes after school, like you said, Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday. And then so teachers are now also getting overworked. Then, of course, that funding, it's like, oh, where do we find the money to pay for that additional tutoring?
Sure.
And so you kind of start getting creative, and then you feel like, okay, this is going to do it. But then, of course, like you mentioned, it's just that due to your findings, it was more on, attendance and the importance of that. And I know that we see high absenteeism, in a lot of districts. And I think that there was definitely a shift. I think well, in my experience, I'll just say this. In my experience, working at some schools, many times it was, well, for example, we're on Thanksgiving break. Well, it was like, hey, Mr. Mendoza, I know next week is Thanksgiving break, but we're leaving this week. Can you give me all the work that my son or daughter need? Because then they were gone for 2 weeks, so then there's that aspect too, where now it's the parents feel like, well, it's okay, no big deal. We're just going to take our kids out and we're all going to go on vacation, a week prior, or we'll extend the vacation a week after.
Yes, there's
And
a
so
lot of
now,
that going on.
and so you miss that too as well, the obviously too, depending on work schedules for parents too. And it never really hit until a couple years ago where I was like, when it was star testing, or maybe even not just a regular day, students coming in, like let's say at 9 a.m. And then I started thinking, I was like, why would this happen? I don't understand. Well, it was usually like, well, it's like maybe the parent just said, hey, you know what? When I go into work, I go in at 9 or 10. I'll just drop them off, as I'm on my way to work. So that way I don't have to get up, go drop them
Yeah,
off, and then come back. Or, we don't know those variables. We don't know those
sure.
extenuating circumstances. But again, like you mentioned, being present, it definitely will make a big difference as far as those star scores. And I think that that's a very interesting find because, again, I think we try and find solutions, and sometimes we may not be asking the right questions or looking at the situation through the correct lens. And obviously, we look at it through a corrective lens where immediately it's like, okay, throw more tutoring at them just to kind of make it up. But in reality, we're like, based on your research and of course the variables that you went over, the attendance is definitely the most important thing. Was there
And there's research on that, right? To say that if you're in school X amount of days, you'll learn more. And there's leading research that says that, hey, we need students in the seats in the school day, right? And so I look at it as tutoring was impactful. It's just I think there's some further research that we can do to say, okay, well, why was it impactful at those campuses, right? Were they consistent with their tutoring schedule? What kind of tutoring did they provide? Was it math, science, STEM, robotics, right? And kind of look at the programming a little more in detail. We just very did at a very surface level. But yeah, I think it's interesting with the attendance.
Yeah, and you know what? I think, and what came to mind too now is when you are tutoring that student, it's for them, it might be the very first time they're seeing that instruction. Where you said, I know sometimes tutoring has a negative connotation, but
Mhm.
tutoring is something that I went to even while I was at university. But what
Yes.
happened is I got that initial teach, but I just wasn't sure or didn't quite follow. And then I would go get that additional support. But here, sometimes that tutoring is going to be that initial teach. So the importance of getting that initial teach by being present in class and then adding that
Yes.
tutoring component would definitely be, very beneficial. So maybe I'm thinking maybe that there's
So that's
something there
part of the
too.
yes. So
Yeah.
part of the research was looking at content alignment from the in-school day instruction to the after-school programming and what that looks like, and if there's any of that, right? And so we didn't get into details about that, but it for further research, it'll be nice to see the after-school program curriculum. Does it tie into what they're learning in the school day?
Excellent. Well, Joey, thank you so much for being with us today and telling us just a little bit about your story, telling us about the work that you're doing through YaizY and letting us know about YaizY too as well. So definitely we will be putting all of that in the show notes too as well, so people can go and visit the website, learn more about YaizY and the career technology education pathways that it offers for grades fourth and up. And so I think that this is something that is fantastic, and especially like I mentioned, a CTE, oftentimes it just feels like it's just a subset. And but I love the fact that today we got to talk about it and say, no, CTE, those are all our students, and schools
Yep.
should see it that way. It's not just, oh, they're CTE. No, it's they're district students, they're all our students. And we definitely need to
Exactly.
make sure that we look at those programs to see how we might better equip our students, that when they come out, they are ready to be, their workforce ready, and they can definitely dive in. So definitely excited about the work there. And obviously, as you continue to grow within YaizY, definitely would love to have you back in a couple of
Sure.
months and so on, and just to see, talking more about career technology. And it'd be fantastic to have you back. So thank you so much. But before we wrap up, Joey, or I should say Dr. Mendoza, and let me just do a full disclaimer here. we are definitely not related. We
Yeah.
yes, we have the same last name, but we are
Yes.
not related.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to throw that in there because some people might say, "Hey, I wonder if they're related." You've had Dr.
Yes.
Mendoza and Dr. Mendoza on the show today.
Yes. Not related.
Not
Yeah.
related, but still just a great friendship that has grown. But thank you so much. But let's go ahead and go with question number 1 here. So as we know, every superhero has a pain point or a weakness. So for Superman, kryptonite was his weakness. So I want to ask you, Joey, in your experience through all the multiple facets of education that you've been in, what would you say currently would be your edu kryptonite?
Whew. That's a tough one. But I tell you one thing that I don't know if it's a kryptonite, but one thing that I'm consistently trying to get better at, because I don't think I'm that is data. Like just because there's so much, right? And like knowing what data to focus on and like draw from and things like that, and then turning that data into something actionable. I'm not where I don't know if it's a kryptonite, but I'm not where I want to be at when it comes to that.
Well, no, that's perfectly great
Yeah.
answer because, like, for me now, transitioning into this role where I'm working with data, it's almost like, all right, like I have all of this, but
Yes.
what story am I going to tell, or
Right.
do I need to tell to make sure that we're making the right decisions? And for me, like just being an overthinker, it's like I just want to put everything in there.
Yes.
But yeah,
Yes.
no,
We
no,
get
no.
it.
I totally get you.
Yes.
All right.
No.
Question number 2, Joey, is if you could have a billboard right smack in the middle of Corpus Christi and it's your own billboard, what would your billboard say and why?
Yeah, I was thinking about that one when you asked me. So I'm sure you've been to Corpus right, a
Yes.
couple of times, and so there's a highway that we call Crosstown Expressway, and so there's an old building like on the northwest side of Corpus Christi, and I'm sure somebody lives there, but it's a 2-story house. I should say building, and at the very top, and like you can tell it's like a 1950s building. It says, "Education is free." And so I would redesign that billboard to say that, right? Just because education has given me an unlimited opportunity. It's taken me places that I thought I never would go, right? As a South Texas boy. And I mean, the people I meet, right, like this, it's all because of education, right? Through the people that I've met, through my educational experiences in the classroom, outside of the classroom, university, all that stuff. So education is freedom.
Love it.
Yeah.
I love it. No, and it's so true. I mean, yeah, like, that's one thing that I've been grateful for in these last 19 years in education. And mind you, I always say, like, I fell into education and I grew up never wanting to be an educator, but once I fell into it, like I absolutely fell in love with everything. I mean, it's just, and like you said, the opportunities that it has afforded me and to be able to see things I never thought I'd be able to see, or connect with people who I never
Yes.
thought I'd be connecting with and having conversations with. I think it's fantastic. And I think that that billboard, definitely a great one. So great answer. Thank you. And the last question, Joey, is if you can trade places with a single person for a day, who would that be and why?
My wife, because her brain works like the way we describe with date, like a computer. And I'm like, God damn, I don't know how you do that. So you're a day computer. I hope our daughter gets your brain because, God, yeah, just the way she breaks up data and like tells a story with it's impressive. But that's to her hard work and all that good stuff. But yeah, my wife, and to see the world through her eyes and the way she breaks it down, and very analytical. So
Love it. That is fantastic. Well, that is a great answer, Joey. Again, Dr. Mendoza, it
Dr.
was an
Mendoza,
honor. It was an
yes.
honor to have you here on the show. Thank you so much for just again connecting on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for like engaging with the content too, and getting to meet you in person was an absolute pleasure. And knowing that we're just a couple of hours away is also great. So maybe someday we can definitely make a plan just to meet up, for breakfast in a chat or something, lunch in a chat or whatever.
I'm
But
all for it.
definitely. But thank you so much for being on the show. And again, just being part of this journey. And I always love to highlight just wonderful educators like yourself that are here today and just amplify the work that you're doing, what you have done, and then just to see where it is that you're going. It's something that is one of the main things here of our show. So again, thank you for today and being part and being here today, episode 344 of my EdTech Live. So 344 today. So for all our audience members checking out this episode, please make sure you visit our website at myedtech.life, where you can check out this amazing episode and other wonderful episodes where I promise you will find some knowledge nuggets that you can sprinkle on to what you are already doing great. And again, as always, thank you so much to our amazing sponsors, Book Creator, EduAid, Yellow Dig, and Peel Back Education. We really appreciate all the love and support that you bring us each and every week, so we can continue to bring you amazing conversations week after week where we can continue to grow professionally and personally as well. So again, my friends, you will find all of Dr. Mendoza's links in the show notes. So make sure you connect with Dr. Mendoza on LinkedIn. Make sure that you follow him. Make sure that you check out YaizY. We're going to put that in the show notes as well. And my friends, until next time, don't forget, stay techy.